Welcome to the Skull with Subtle Red Candy Flames video, part 1. You can see here I've actually drawn up my reference. I've printed it out on a bit of A4 paper, and I've just, with a light box, just transferred the design towards the back so that I can see which bits I need to cut out. So just go ahead and chop them out. So the bottom section here is a stretchy sort of skin coming off the teeth and the jaw of the skull. So what we'll do is we'll incorporate the flames within that area. So yeah, we'll have some flames licking through his mouth, which would be pretty cool. So I'm doing this so that I can use this to draw it on. So instead of drawing on using a chalk pencil as I usually do, I'm actually going to airbrush straight on with the white, and that'll just mark it out for me. So just drawing in the cranium of the skull there, just freehand that in, carefully cut, and there you have it. Stencil's ready to go. So I've got an aluminium composite panel that I've already prepped using 800 wet and dry sandpaper, and I've painted it black using an SEM base coat black. So you saw now I've just held that stencil and just dusted white to create the shape of the skull. So you can see the image is there and it's painted on. I'm using House of Colour white, so fairly reasonably thin, sort of 1:1 or maybe a bit more than 1:1, just to get a bit of coverage still. And I'm using the Mike LaValle TrueFire stencils Series 2, and you can see I'll just be alternating between the stencils. So I'm just shaping the flames here using the white, just sort of ghosting them in off that skull design. So I'm only hitting the edge of the stencil and then I'm drawing with it freehand. So don't get in the habit of using the stencil too much. You need to sort of flick your flames off that and get a bit of flow happening. You can see I'm working in more and more detail into this skull now, so I'm actually bringing out the artwork. The airbrush that I'm using is an Iwata Custom Micron CM, so with the large color cut. So this just allows for me to hold a bit more paint, but I still get the performance of a Micron, which is great. So you can see here I'm just utilizing the light source, so top left hand corner for the light source at this stage, and I'm just working in all the teeth at the moment for the skull. Using the white as I normally do with most of my videos, just actually build the artwork. These bits here are just stretchy sort of skin, so it looks like the flesh is burnt off this skull. So just to add a bit of excitement to the piece, just working that jawbone and the cranium and just fogging it in from a distance. Keep your air on all the time and just back and forth for paint for each stroke that you do, so really use that double action. And I just freehanded a few little flame licks in there as well, and now I'm just doing the back end of that jaw, just freehand that in because I didn't cut that out with the stencil. So go back over, and on the lighter areas just let them dry and then build them up again, so you can see any bits that need adjusting. You can fog in a bit more on the cranium there just to get that a bit brighter. Don't stress too much, we're going to run back in with the darker tone as well, just to shape it. What I'm actually doing is I'm using a De Beers Pearl White, and I'm actually just putting a dust over the whole area that I've airbrushed, so only the flames and the skull. Try not to get it on the background. The reason I'm doing this is just so that it's got a bit more sort of pop when we put the candy red on top of the actual airbrush skull and flames. So what I'm doing now is I'm using a thinned SEM black. I'm going to stick with this color. Usually I use a brown black or a blue black, but for this particular exercise I'm actually going to stick with the actual base coat black from SEM. That way it will, any of the overspray that I want to get rid of, which you can see sort of just above my airbrush there, you can see that big glow of overspray, which is normal. That does happen when you're doing stuff freehand. So with this particular black, because it's exactly the same as the base coat that I put down to start with, I can actually cut that back in and make it nice and neat. So you don't need to worry about overspray. We're just going to work in all of the detail, all the fine cracks. Just step back, have a look there, and now remember your light source, so top left, and we just cut in. I tend to do all my detail areas first, so do the eye sockets and the nose on the skull. It's always a good starting point to make sure that your airbrush is running smooth and you're happy with your mix. And then I tend to start to shape it. As I go along, I put the cracks and all the little bits and pieces in just to create a bit of texture on the bone so that it's just not flat. If you were going to do this in a bone color, you'd obviously use flesh tones and browns to shade it, and then highlights and the darker shadow to bring it all out. But because we're going to candy this entire artwork with a candy apple red from House of Colour, we want to go with a bright white base, and like I mentioned earlier, I've put that white pearl on it. All that's going to do is just to give it a bit of a shimmer and make it pop a little bit more when the sun hits it. And once it's obviously cleared, it's really going to have a bit of movement to it rather than just using a flat white. So, for this exercise, I just thought I'd do something a little different. So you can see now I'm working in on the teeth. So up nice and close with your airbrush. You'll notice that I usually wear a glove on my left hand, so the opposite hand to what I use when I'm airbrushing. The reason being is if I need to kneel up against or lean up against the panel for whatever reason, I'm not going to get any contaminants from my skin onto the panel. Same goes if I'm doing a Harley tank or working on a vehicle or whatever you are working on when it's automotive. You should always remember that you want to keep the surfaces nice and clean as possible. I like to use a water-based degreaser by U-POL. It's a great product. You can actually, whenever you finish any artwork, you can actually wipe over it. It's a water-based degreaser and it works really well over any artwork or any candy. You can actually wipe it carefully with a rag and it does clean the surface nicely before going into getting it cleared, or if you're going to clear it yourself. So it's a really good product to use, so check that one out. You can see now I'm still working in more and more detail in the teeth area there, just gradually getting darker and darker. So basically up close with your airbrush, paint on, paint off, and you can see now I'm just sort of bringing in those back teeth. So just outlining them and then knocking them back with the shadow. And then what I'm doing is the negative area in between those teeth and the top teeth, I'm blacking that out just to really give that sense of depth. And then I keep jumping back and forth and I sort of add detail as I go and just check where I'm at. Remember also your light source, so don't forget about that when you're painting away. So pull out that back tooth and just dusting in the shadow there from the jawbone. So I'm running a drop shadow on either one of those teeth as well, just to give them a bit more shape, so later on we can bring a bit of a highlight on the opposite side, so the left hand side there, which would be your light source. Just detailing some of those flame licks and still knocking back in that jaw area, and now just added a bit of a drop shadow to that flame lick so it makes it look like it's actually popping out of the skull's mouth. It's pretty cool. And just sort of, it's a skull, so make it up as you go. Cracks, texture. You can pick up some great texture stencils from Art Tool, some freehand templates, so they've got a whole range of different textures which are really cool for anything from doing skulls like this. You can also use them on rocks and granite and even clouds, so there's heaps of cool stuff which is worth checking out. So you can see I'm still working with that SEM, just pulling out more and more detail, some of these flame licks as well, just to create a bit more depth and 3D effect. So don't be scared to sort of shape the skull as much as possible. and with those flames I'm just knocking some of them back a little bit, sort of the flames in the background, just to create the illusion that there's flames trickling off the skull. You've got that 3D effect, and then we've got some in the background there as well, because we will add another layer of flame too, so we'll get to that later in part 2 of this video. You can see I'm cutting around the entire skull, so nice and close and neat, and that SEM black just blends back into the original color. So whatever the original color is that you used, I mean, saying it's a black, even if it's a different type of color, say a base coat blue or red or whatever, it'll still work. You can cut that in. Or again, if you need to protect the color, if it's a candy color, then obviously you have to mask the skull. So just finishing off the detail and you know, making it really pop. Okay, so just finishing off using the SEM black, just working in some of those flame licks. And now you can see here's a picture of the artwork. So at the stage it should be after watching this video. The next stage we're going to add another layer of flames, and we're going to use a House of Color Candy Red to cover the entire artwork. So hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you for part 2.